Tabletopped will start after the following messages.
Hi, my name is Mike, and I'm from the Old Ways Podcast, here to introduce you to your next favorite show. What is the Old Ways Podcast? It's a weekly tabletop RPG show in actual play format where a group of amazing role players serve up new experiences in homebrew and published scenarios. Well over 500 episodes of beautiful, fully produced actual play content for you to enjoy. Check us out, the Old Ways Podcast. Thanks.
Hey everyone, it's me, Nick, from the Tabletop Podcast. When I'm not hosting, I'm thinking about ways to create a better podcast for you guys, and I think I landed on something pretty fun. In fact, if you go to our Patreon at patreon.com/tabletopped and join for as little as $1 a month, you can get access to a new episode a month that we're going to start putting out. In fact, we're going to be calling this one Wild Magic, I think, in that we're going to talk about anything and everything that interests us, not just TTRPGs, though there will be a lot of that. It is truly unhinged, and if you are a fan of the podcast and all of the hosts, you're definitely going to want to be on it. We're thinking of dropping these at the end of each month, so join our Patreon today. That is patreon.com/tabletopped. Oh, and there's going to be so much more coming out in the new year there, so don't miss it. Sign up today. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Tabletopped. It is your host, Nick, and today I got two of the best in the biz, baby. We're going to be talking to Morgan Dangerfield and Chris Peters today. Both you may know from their work DMing and also from their wonderful book. Morgan, you just had a self-published book come out from your Heroes of Evermore campaign. You also might know of Heroes of Evermore from Instagram and some other places in the ether, but I really want to kind of throw it over to you guys. We're talking today about professional DMing, kind of getting away from just, games around a kitchen table. And now you're starting to do this more for a project. You're doing this to make money. You're doing this because it's your passion. You want to take it to the next level. And both of you guys do this. So I thought it would be great to have you on this early at this early time of the year. So why don't you guys introduce yourselves, kind of to explain how long you've been DMing, where your DMing kind of roots come from, how long you've been playing TTRPGs, and just tell us a little bit about yourself.
I guess starting off, thanks, Nick, for having us. We definitely appreciate it. We've been talking back and forth for a while now, so it's a pleasure to actually be on with you. But as far as me, we were just talking about it. I've been DMing just over a year now. Actually, last November is when I started my first campaign. I've been playing since I think Advanced Dungeons and Dragons with my dad, but took a break and then kind of coming back to it here and there throughout the last 20 years or so. But actually, interestingly enough, starting it off, it was never my intention or want to even DM. I had a group of friends that wanted to play outside of the Adventure League rule set that we were playing at the time, and it was I wanted to play too. And my buddy was like, "Well, let's run a game." I was like, "Sure, yeah, let's run a game." And then it kind of sat for a while, and I was like, "Hey, when are you going to run this game?" And he goes, "I'm not running the game." And it went stagnant.
That's how it happens.
And so 2 months went by, and finally I was like, you know what? Whatever, I'll do it. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'll jump in and give it a shot. So it was born out of necessity more so than a want, but then ended up finding kind of my niche in it and thoroughly enjoying it. And it's definitely gone way further than I ever expected it to. I mean, even sitting here with you right now and Morgan and just all these big name and people in the industry, absolutely humbling and amazing. And it was kind of my start off.
Yeah, you really
this.
fell into the forever DM pit trap that they set for you.
It was funny because I've got a bunch of buddies who have one of our buddies, Team Drew. Yeah, talking with him, and the guy's been DMing for probably longer I've been alive. He's great guy, and he messaged me. He's like, solid points on the name. He's like, well, how long have you been DMing? I was like, how about we change the topic on this real quick?
The year lasts forever.
Exactly. Yeah.
First year seems like forever.
Time is relative.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
And how about you, Morgan?
So I started Dungeons and Dragons I played a homebrew. This is not even a technical system. I don't know what they were running, at 4th edition or something like that. But I was hooked. It was 13 years ago, and I only played 3 sessions. And to this day, I can remember my character. I can remember what happened in those sessions. I just have a true love for storytelling. And when I decided to get into it, some 10 years later, I was okay, starting to ask people, and that awkward beginning where you're okay, do I actually tell people I do this? Do I ask people if they want to do this? In public, right? This is church, soccer teams, anybody who I'm talking to at work. And so anyways, end up, deciding, okay, I'm going to need be a dungeon master. Went through all the Running of the Game series by Matthew Colville. He's amazing. Dungeon Dude videos. I mean, the whole works. And just fell in love with it, fell in love with the process of it, fell in love with teaching people at the table how to play it, seeing this joy, what do you mean I can do anything I want? You can choose to do anything and be anyone you want. And so taking a break from reality and the harshness of the world and bringing joy on the table, we were just talking the other day, how I love leaving the characters on cliffhanger, just a clip. Yeah. So I've been back to your question. I've been DMing for 4 years solid now in our homebrewed world. It's my baby. It's essentially creating this world in my brain. In the shower, a lot of that inspiration happens. Just so you know, you DMs out there.
Put a pin in that, because I have something to say about that coming back.
Fair.
Yes. It's something that I've loved. I've had different players at each campaign. I've got 2 returning players in campaign 2. I've done one shots with brand new players and different players in between. So I love it. I miss it. When we had our baby, I was talked with my wife and took a little break in there, right? We came to an agreement. I needed to be a good father as well and have that life balance. But man, did I miss it, and excited to be back into
just
it.
Until she's old enough to start playing herself. Then no breaks needed.
Then when I watch her, I just teach her to play and DM herself.
Well, it's my daughter, she's 6, and I do a lot of all the terrain and stuff. I craft it all myself. And she's at the point now in the age where she'll actually come out into the garage with me and sit there and craft with me. So nice. I'm this is come full circle. Yes. She's like, Dad, what was the last one? I did
production.
Right? I did a resin pour. I was a 12 by 12 battle mat. And I was asking her, I was Scarlett, what do you want to build? And she goes, well, I want it to be dead grass and then a magical river and then a live grass. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we can do that. Yeah. So did a full with flocking, gridded it out to 12, and then did a deadened grass on one side, and in the river itself did a resin pour on it, put magic gold flitter or flecks in it, and then did a green flocking on the other side. She was over the moon about it because she helped me with the whole process.
Beautiful.
In the back of my mind, I'm like, yes.
You got to keep her away from Warhammer, or she will be poor for an entire life.
Right.
But yeah, that's great. That's awesome. And you guys have already sort of touched on a bunch of different stuff that I wanted to talk to you about specifically. First, let me just go back to that, the creative process, because I do want to talk to you both about the differences between a creative process when you are doing a game around a kitchen table for your friends, and what that creative process looks like when you're looking to actually make something that you are then doing either for strangers or as a product, doing something a little bit more professionally. But when it comes to the creative process, Morgan, you mentioned like figuring out all this stuff in the shower. I actually read a study recently that was like, okay, so the reason why no one is as creative as they used to be is because we have all of the stimulus all the time. And the time that your brain comes up with the unique ideas is when you have no stimulus coming in. So it's essentially creating the stimulus. So if you're ever like stuck on a story point or whatever, go take a walk. It's great.
Go sit in the silence somewhere.
Yeah. So it's true. Studies have proven. I love it. Yeah. And NPC voices too. I mean, my wife may look weird at me for a little while, but in the shower, I mean, I'm practicing voices. For sure.
It's part of your session prep is a 3-hour shower on Sundays.
I'm so scared for your players.
So let's start talking a little bit about the creative process differences. So when I'm creating something for my friends, a lot of times it's like really I'm more on the improvisational side as a DM, and so I create like a loose sketch, and I say like, okay, if I'm doing like one session 3 hours. I can get maximum 4 encounters in, whether that's a skill encounter, a combat encounter, whatever, just because I know me and how I run stuff and how I can get real slow on certain things. But when it comes to something that you're trying to DM for strangers, or you're trying to create something that fits into like a specific block that you want to say, like, this is polished, this is good, this is, elevated from, just a kitchen table game. What are the differences in those processes for you guys? How did you come to a place where you can enter into a session and feel really confident, like, this is going to go well, this is a professional table, let's do this?
So this kind of hit me super hard last year. Well, over the past summer, I got invited to DM at Comic-Con San Diego for 2023. And previous to that, I had done exactly what you said. I was DMing for my friends or, people that I was at least acquaintances with. Running 4 or 5 games a day at a convention and it being a constant change of players, even if you're running the exact same module or adventure, it changes every time because the players at the table, which is one of the beautiful things about this whole thing is you can tell you as the DM can tell the exact same story, but everyone's going to interpret it differently. Being able to quickly read people and be like, okay, I can push this a little bit, or I need to pull back here, and getting a feel for the players at the table is huge. At least I believe on that part, because you could make the same jokes even with a different group, and then they're either going to be flops or worst case, somebody gets offended and then that ruins D&D for all of them, for the rest of their life kind of thing. And that's definitely not what we want. So being able to read the individuals, body language, what they're speaking out to you, whether or not they're more extroverted or they're introverted, if they're being shy at the table, trying to coax that out of them to let them know that this is a comfortable environment. That's a whole dynamic that absolutely is entirely different than when you're just playing with your friends that you see, on a weekly basis kind of thing. But I would say the ability to read the people is a huge thing on that. And whether that's a homebrew mod or a written, published Adventure League mod or something out of an adventure book, you're playing a chapter out of there kind of thing. That aspect, at least to me, is pretty big, because it plays in, like you were saying, Nick, the improvisational portion, and then pulling it back to make sure that each of the characters feel comfortable in the space that they're in, and being able to develop their characters and actually engage in the role playing.
That really resonates with me, because one thing that I think is really hard about like modules or running something for different groups that you've kind of created. Like I've created a module called Candle Cove that I really like. It's sort of a mystery detective story, and I've been sort of doing different run throughs with different groups of people to try to play test it and see what works, what doesn't, kind of thing. And like you were saying, it is interesting because what people want out of the game is going to completely change how the game is played each time. So like when you're talking about like Adventure League folks, like and forgive me if I'm wrong, this might have been a while ago, but if Adventure League is scored, right? There's like a score element that you then have sort of like a competitive bit with the other people in the Adventures League. Is that
in a way, yeah.
And so like there's like that sort of thing. So maybe some people are coming in really like for like a very specific reason when it comes to that. But then also when you're at a con, maybe people are sitting at a table for the first time, and what they're trying to do is like figure out whether or not they like this sort of entertainment form.
What D&D is.
So there's like a very broad reason why people sit at a table, and when you're with your friends, it's pretty easy. It's like, I want to sit at the table so that I can hang out with my friends. So,
right, exactly. And then being able to read that, and like you said, hitting it right on the head again, is that everyone sits, whether it's, friends for 20 years or whether it's new people at a table, everyone comes to the table for a different reason. And being able to be aware of that and understand that, it's a learned skill for sure. But one that all it takes is to be empathetic towards everybody, be kind, open-hearted, and be understanding that, hey, this person coming to the table may be using this to escape the reality of something that's really difficult they're going through in their life. And so, I mean, pardon my language, just don't be a dick. It's not that hard.
There's pretty like a very basic rule of like, let's just all have fun here.
Right? Exactly.
You have to have that rule of cool to some degree. Like, yes, we have the core rules there. They're going to keep us going. But to piggyback off of what you guys are saying in regards to the different players and the different skill levels, when you are, based on your question, when you are preparing for a session of strangers, I feel like I had just recently done this, and I feel like you have to, for a session, let's say it's like 3 to 4 hours that you have these people at the table and different skill levels, as long as you can voice that in the beginning to everyone. So everyone has that expectation, like you're saying, just be empathetic, but then get everyone on board. So the 20-year experienced veteran over here and the brand new player, like, he doesn't expect everyone else to have that experience. And it sets the tone at the table like, hey, they're not going to know everything. This is going to be a little bit slower pace, but we're going to get through it. And maybe give them some more like lore dumps to get into or something to follow. But in prepping a session or a one shot, well, when you do a one shot, you should prep 3 shot. But you're like, we're going to take 30 minutes to do this. Triple that time. And then just prepping, like you said, kind of a little bit of each encounter, right? You got to role play. If you only have them at the table for so long and it's not a long campaign, even in a session in a campaign, like a role play session, combat encounter, maybe a trap or a puzzle encounter, and then finish it up. So
I think that like the trifecta of the encounters is something that we talk about all the time. The like you said, like I'm assuming that with like trap kind of encounters, also sort of like a skill encounter, like how do you use your character in a way to like get around a puzzle or problem, like you were talking about, and then like the combat stuff. Right. That combat is one that's like 3 times as long. Just plan for that to take an hour.
No kidding. I think even when we're both I know, because I typically run my campaign games on Tuesday nights. You run yours on Thursdays. And like I'll be going through the story, and then I'll look at the time. I'm like, and like it'll be like an hour and a half before we're supposed to end, and I'm like, so are you guys good to stay an extra 30 minutes? And like, what do you mean we still got an hour? I'm like, well,
so why don't we
roll initiative?
This is sort of like a great segue. Like I really like the idea of prep, of like what you guys were talking about is when you're prepping for a group that you're not super familiar with, or you're trying to do something specific, that you're trying to create something that is a loose structure that you can improv within, but also you're constantly looking towards your audience, essentially your players, and saying like, what are these people here for? And you're kind of uncovering that as you play. Is there a way though that you build the session so that you can try to either be modular, so like if you do get into that time crunch space that you're talking about at like a con or something, that you can be like, okay, I can really ratchet this down so that we can get through this? Or is there a thing that you do? Because what I run into a lot of times is like different people wanting different things completely can slow things down, especially when it comes to role play. In my experience, if someone's not very comfortable with that, or they're not very familiar with it, and then they don't want to just jump in, there's like a certain level of like trying to peel back the reservations that they have before they can really engage with something. And honestly, like when it comes to kind of not commodifying this kind of work, but like telling a story concisely for kind of like a random set of inputs that you're constantly just trying to figure out, like, how can I time this out right? So like how do you guys approach that? So like Morgan, if you're approaching a table that you're not super familiar with everyone at, you have something, you know how to run it, but like how are you going to get it so that you make sure that it is a complete experience for people, even though you have no idea what you're walking into?
You have to pivot on the fly. I mean, you have to just improv as much as you need to, and you have everything laid out ahead of time, and so maybe dropping a couple enemies, like if it's a final combat, maybe not throw in as many minions. It depending on AC and HP, there's different HP levels that you can work with on certain. I mean, homebrew, it's a lot easier to be able to adjust that on the fly, dial down ACs and things like that. And minions can be 1 HP, like they're just there to provide an element of terror in the players, essentially, right? That level of stress and anxiety that, like, oh my gosh, there's all this we have to take care of, when really it's the main boss. So you can drop those pretty quickly if need be. But in combat, that's what I would say. Along the lines of role play, like you can, as a DM, instigate, like, okay, make a perception check, like you don't have to wait for them to ask to do so or to search something. Like, hey, you're in the general vicinity, I want to see what you see, and kind of push them along in that encounter.
I think that there's like a really strong subtle thing. I know some people, like there's a lot of stuff on like Reddit and things about how people hate when the DM or GM is like, you start to feel like a tingle on your spine or something, because they're like, no, I don't, this is my character, stop telling me how I feel, like that sort of thing. But I also think that is exactly how you can basically prompt people along by saying, like, you enter a room, it's a dark dungeon, the water is dripping from one specific tile in the ceiling, you see rusted bars and a skeleton behind it. As you enter the room, the air that you're breathing becomes really cold. What do you want to do? And then they're like, because the narrator's voice is such a camera that you can kind of point towards things that you want them to interact with. Chris, same question towards you. I would really love to talk to you a little bit about how to make this sort of modularity of your sessions when you're going into a group that you may not know or not know what they're all about or what they want. How do you approach that?
I kind of, as you're looking at it ahead of time, and I think I've sent you a few of the modules that I've ran, Morgan, and if you look at them ahead of time, and a lot of it comes into the preparation you put into it. If you spend the time, if you grab an adventure book and kind of just, all right, hey, we're doing this right now, things are either going to get shortened down or drug out, accordingly based off of the table. But I think if you put enough preparation into it, you can tailor it down so that way the ADHD tendencies of every D&D table are at least a little bit more streamlined. The other thing that I do is, specifically when it comes to encounters, is my encounter board set up. I've got like tabs that sit across the top of my DM screen so that the players can see who's next coming up. I think Morgan's got this awesome battle axe tracker, notifying the players like, hey, now it's your turn, you're coming up, like you're next, and then you're next, and the players can see it so they can already be thinking about what their actions are going to be, as opposed to being oblivious in the dark. Oh, hey, it's my turn, wait, what happened? Oh, okay, all right, this moved around, all right, now I gotta adjust this. I think trying to engage the players to play their characters as much as possible, and the less cat herding you have to do at a D&D table, the easier it gets. But that all comes from the narrative storytelling and how much you encourage them to be engaged in it in the first place. So it's kind of like a double-edged sword in that. If you're very lacklusterly telling a story, you can't necessarily expect somebody to be heavily engaged in that same story and then be like, okay, well, why is your turn taking 10 minutes? well, they're trying to figure out what you didn't tell them. So taking the time, and that a lot of that comes from the preparation before the session even begins, is all right, what do I want to lead into this? And maybe I'm using minions as little distracting things. Maybe they're 1 HP things, but there's 50 of them, which is like a wizard's fireball wet dream kind of thing.
Yeah.
But
100%.
but encouraging the players to be involved, or a lot of things that I'll do, and my players end up watching this, I apologize in advance, is if I see people starting to get squirrel moments and distracted by something in the middle of encounters, I'll be like, hey, Mal, roll me a perception check. And he'll be like, wait, what? And like, maybe it's included, maybe it's nothing, depending on the situation, but it reels them back in. Like, okay, hey, this is what when it gets up to their turn, hey, this is what you noticed, or this is what, or you heard or felt, or something like that. Really encouraging everybody in a way that doesn't feel like you're a parent scolding a child, but encouraging them to be involved in the game. And whether that's through encounters, whether that's through traps and skill checks, creating the environment that everyone feels, hey, I want to be at this table. I'm invested in this moment. And whether that's a homebrew mod, whether that's a standard Adventure League mod or an adventure book or some hybrid of any of that, I think that's really crucial, is engaging and encouraging that involvement, because that'll always speed it up and allows you to bring in more and more and more, work with more time to get what you want done in a session.
I totally agree with that. So many things kind of were sprang to mind during what you were saying.
Send it, man.
So I would love to kind of start exploring some of them. Specifically, I want to talk about, because so far our conversation has been a little bit more towards prep and like maybe shorter sessions, like Adventure League stuff and everything like that. But a lot of places where people start when they come to like a professional D&D sort of thing is either like creating an actual play or going on to Roll20 and kind of selling their D&D services there, or their DMing or GMing, which can be like a longer term relationship with those people. Like maybe you're doing 5 sessions, maybe you're doing a year, and it's sort of an ongoing thing and you're trying to develop this. So I kind of want to pit you two against each other. So Morgan, you said that most of your world
Kind of fun. Every time.
most of your DMing has been homebrew, which is the same case for me. But I think that one thing when it comes to DMing for folks who are maybe not familiar with you is that the lore and the story becomes almost an obstacle in some ways, because it's like, what do I know that my players don't know? What do I need them to know? How do I invest them in this world that I know very well in my head and I've created, and like all of that kind of stuff. And then I want to pop over and talk to you, Chris, about like running out of a module, because that is like the similar thing where you have actually a lot of stuff in the book where you're like, okay, this is stuff that I know. Maybe other players in that case do know, because the modules are everywhere, you can read them, but most people probably are not, sitting down to something that they already know very, very in depth. So that becomes another thing, because that has somebody else already saying like, okay, this is an important character, this is an important plot point, they need to do this. And like, how do you get that information to them? So why don't we start with Morgan, and then we'll pass the buck to kind of explore both of these genres. So Morgan, when it comes to homebrew, where you are the sole creator of that stuff, how do you disseminate that information in a way that feels natural but also successful?
Yeah, a great question. And actually, we have firsthand experience in having Chris just jump in as a celebrity guest in our campaign. And so I worked with him. He gave me some backstory. I gave him a general idea of the realm. So this is, I guess it would go into a little bit of planning of this. Like he would give me a backstory based on what I've given him on the realm, sees a map. Okay, maybe I could be from here and do this. Okay, awesome. Even if he didn't do that, if there was a new player, brand new coming in, my goal is 100% to involve them into the realm, to make them feel like they are a part of it, that is alive and well in their character. So I could even take DM being homebrew and say like, oh my gosh, for the first time in years, you see your long lost brother who left your clan, and he's coming out of the arena gates, and you feel sweat on your face. And it's like instantly they're like, oh crap, like, how do you feel about this? You know? And, he had, like, I had his uncle be like the overseer of the arena games in this arena battle we just did. And so he, like, based on how he's perceiving himself, like he's the one who got him thrown into this slavery fighting pit, and he's trying to go after his estate, and there's like this DM on DM bargaining match that he's like going after the family's estate, and I'm like, well, your family's not dead yet. It was beautiful, and it was great. But that's another DM, right? So as a player, like, especially if they're a shy or introverted player or whatever the case may be, I will throw these things out there for them. We have a new player, and I'm like, you see your wife after you hear your village was attacked, and you see your wife come out onto the arena. How do you feel? And he's like brand new, not into role playing too much, and so he's like, oh my gosh, like, what do I do? And he's like kind of freaked out, but it's funny watching players squirm a little bit. But he's thrown into this world, and I'm like, what are you gonna do? And it makes them think. So in dropping lore too, I will 100% include them into it, and then I'll give hints, and maybe I'll give a little background if I'm dropping big lore for an existing player and say like, hey, they actually did this and fought this previously, without metagaming, but including them at the table. That would be general knowledge of the realm.
Because there is going toward that general knowledge thing. That is the thing that, like, I think that most DMs really struggle with, because it could be, especially in homebrew, where you're like, okay, the god like Caliph comes down, and like she's shining, and exactly what this means, and then the player's like, what does that mean? like what is this? Who is this thing? Like, this god, I guess, but also like, should I know who this is? So like that, I feel like is like one of the hardest things to like really get into your bones of like how to do that information without it feeling like, a lot of people say like it feels railroady when DMs are trying to like tell lore and everything. I really disagree with that, because a lot of the time, like, you can say, I personally, I just don't like it when it becomes like very much like a locked chest of like, you can't know this. The players can't know this. Because I think that like most people living through the world have a lot of weird knowledge in their head. And like most people, if you had a group of 5 people together, have a very broad base of knowledge. So I agree that sort of like giving out that information kind of freely, but not in a metagamey sort of way, is like very important.
Yeah, and it depends on the experience of the player. Like, if you have an experienced player coming in and they're like, okay, I want to roll history check. Like, would I know this? Or like they're proactively asking about the realm and like things based on their background of their character and what they would know, and they're looking into it. Great. If they're a new player, then you kind of got to feed them that a little bit.
So why don't we flip over to modules? Because like I said before, modules are very specific. They're playgrounds. You can do kind of whatever you want in them, but there are certain pieces in there that if you're running a module for a group, that like is kind of expected that it runs kind of in a similar way. So like, Chris, how do you like approach that sort of thing?
So I definitely like a lot of the published modules that Wizards of the Coast puts out. But I take all of the modules in, Jack Sparrow says they're like the pirate code. It's more like guidelines to me. I very loosely follow the modules, but kind of pull back to those modules as a spine of the story, basically. But then my Tuesday game, I'm running a Strixhaven campaign. And for those of you that have run or read the Strixhaven campaign book, it's a great book. It's for, I don't know if can I say copyright things? It's Dungeons and Dragons Harry Potter.
You can also swear as much as you like.
Okay, cool. But it's definitely Dungeons and Dragons Harry Potter. But the thing is, the book is written, and take it or leave it how you want it. It is very lacking in a way that allows for a lot of creative opportunities.
That's cool.
I think that's a good way to phrase it. So the book as it's written is can be run straightforward and straight through with nothing added into it. You get the main storyline, and then you kind of go on with it. I wanted something more immersive for my players, more including to my players. So I'll run, especially on my Tuesday campaign, which is my ongoing campaign, I'll run I'm running Strixhaven right now, but then I pull in all of these other like homebrew content. I don't set the world isn't even set in Faerun. It's set in an alternative dimension called Arcavios. So it really is my own world, but using that storyline, but changing the locations and everything like that. So that way it's mine kind of thing, and I can own it sort of thing.
Do you find that helps you be able to like get that information out because it is sort of pliable and you have a little bit more ownership over it, so you can make some sort of like game time decisions, I guess?
Exactly. Yeah, no, 100%. Because in say, going back to it with Strixhaven, one of the things they do is every year the students they either choose or they're given a list of like 4 or 5 courses they're taking for the year. But the book doesn't really give anything about the courses themselves. It follows the main plot. And I'm like, this is a huge missed opportunity. And so like I took the time to write. So I have the players roll for what classes they're in. And then whichever ones they have 2 or more players in, I will write out encounters and adventures and skill checks and things, basically giving them a lecture based on that magical topic and that magical course, and kind of play that into the storyline as opposed to just overlooking it. Yeah, so prior to that, I have it's taken me quite a bit of time, probably 40 or 50 pages of like lore, history, world, backstory kind of thing that I guess I could hand to my players. I actually did send it to them. I was like, hey, if you guys want to read it, by all means, I don't expect you to.
That's awesome.
But it's definitely like history of the world, geography, political structures of each of the continents that I've written kind of thing. And so it's there. And I try to, like Morgan was saying, drop it in where it's relative. If it's a character who's from from the Evos Isles, the pirate archipelago that I have, and he'll be like, hey, would I know this? And I'm like, yeah, you would. And then I'll play that into that. Or if it's something adjunctive to the storyline that I'm telling that would be relative, I'll kind of give that information if that specific character is from that area. Like, hey, you would know this. And I think having it in my own world and not set in Faerun, like the adventure mod is written for, is completely different. Because one, that's a whole lore and backstory that I don't have to relearn to then turn around and teach somebody else. I can be like, no, that didn't happen. Like, well, how do you know? I'm like, well, it's my world. I made it. That's how I know.
Yeah.
Because I'm the DM and I said so.
Fine.
That's why. Right. But I would say, so to look at it from that side of it and the hybrid homebrew adventure, and then switching over entirely to when I do, because I run a few times a month, I'll host straight Adventure League mod games. But now switching from that side of it to running a sanctioned Adventure League game is a completely different thing, because then I have to fall within these parameters and make these rules, because the way the players coming to the table are playing the characters, they then have to take they don't have to, but they take that character and they go play at someone else's table expecting a similar outcome or something like that. So even coming down to magical items they may be awarded or how they played a character, it's a whole different, it's a duality of it, of going from playing either a straight homebrew or a homebrew hybrid to playing a more sanctioned game kind of thing. Even in, like, spoiler alert, even in my sanctioned Adventure League games, I was telling Morgan this, I set them in my world of Arcavios, and then because a lot of the players that I have for those groups, they do overlap, I use those adventure stories as free lore in my homebrew game.
Nice.
Yeah.
So, like, when these characters run this adventure mod, it's like they do this epic thing. Well, like, how I incorporate that so I don't go crazy and lose my brain is I take that adventure and then I use that as some type of lore plot in my homebrew game to kind of bring it full circle. And especially, I've had a lot of players that are on my Tuesday game that play in my Adventure League games too. And then I'll reference something that they then did as a different character. And they're like,
cool.
Wait, then did this happen? And was this person there? I'm like, yeah, how did you know that? And I was like, roll a history check. I was like, yeah, you don't know that. I'm like, oh, come on. It was their character though. And so it kind of brings it around full circle and using those points. But getting into if you have different players every single time, that is definitely a difficult part to do. And so I think it's targetedly feeding those individuals the information that is relative or that they need to know to progress the storyline. Because I think either Morgan or I could probably go off for hours and hours on the lore of the world that we've created. I think any dungeon master who puts in effort into building their own lore can do the same thing. The players don't necessarily always want to sit there and listen to, 3 hours of the lineage of Darth Plagueis and like, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so tailoring it to what's relative and the players need to know in that moment, I think is a huge part of that, whether that's Adventure League, some hybrid, or like what you have with Evermore.
Yeah, and with Evermore, I would send them the brief what's happening currently times, and then I actually took all the lore and condensed it into like what they need to know, like the First Great War and the Second Great War, 1,000 years ago, 200 years ago, and it's in the book as well. And so that way there's an idea, and then I'm dropping hints of those climactic wars that had happened over time and how they impacted the realm as the players experience Evermore. So there's like a bite size that I'll give to any player that's going to jump in, even one time or throughout the time, so they have an idea of what they're doing. But
that's why you're a published writer and I'm just a fiddler. Fiddler on the roof.
No. 50 pages of lore. I want to see it.
I got you. I think I sent it to you.
Bro, I haven't read it. I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah. Case in point. Case in point.
All right. So we've talked a little bit about sort of involving your players and also about kind of lore and how to do this for strangers, how to start kind of transferring your skills from a kitchen table game to kind of professional DMing. After the break, I really want to talk about something that kind of both of you are known for, which is sort of your immersive play styles. So why don't we do that right after these messages?
Hey cool people, do you like mead, magic, and long walks in the icy tundra? Ever wonder what your sled dogs are thinking about? Why not cap off your night with a frosty tabletop adventure?
You will come to love my beef cliff.
You're at the common room. Go to your room.
Excuse us.
Excuse me, Dolcliffe. What's your favorite food?
Sausages, probably.
No, you look like a strong lot, but I've got more friends than you.
Carnelian's like shortened on the ground and he's standing
You
on
know
top of the table.
what you have to
You
do.
know what you have to do.
Carnelian stabs him in the butt.
What did he say?
He likes sausages.
Oh my god, me too.
Alright, I'll sit beside Ward and start carving his rod.
Oh my god. Sveta, my rod's nearing completion by the looks of things.
Unless the four of you can stop them.
Well, grab your Ugg boots and join Reflex Save every Wednesday on your favorite podcast platform.
Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletopped. We are here with two really great professional DMs, Morgan Dangerfield and Chris, the forever DM.
Yes.
So why don't we talk a little bit about what we were going to talk about right before the break happened, which is how do you immerse your players in your games? Morgan, Heroes of Evermore specifically has like very high production values. Chris, you were talking earlier this episode about how you were creating all of these landscape pieces for your games with your daughter, all that kind of stuff. How do you guys go about really trying to make the games feel really immersive, especially when you may not be, super confident? It might be a new thing that you're trying out, all that kind of stuff. How do you immerse these players who kind of have all had long days maybe, but this is something that they're interested in doing? They want to come for fun, but maybe they don't know all the rules or have much experience with TTRPGs. How do you immerse them in your game?
Yeah. I'll go first.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in Evermore, I mean, it depends on campaign 1, campaign 2, but bottom line is throw some fire in their face. That's the tagline for
literally gasoline matches.
Whatever.
You want to literally hit their 5 senses. No, you hitting all the senses, right? And so as soon as they walk in the door, I have a candle lit. I'll try not to, we have flavored candles, like different scented candles for different encounters. Gameplay Candles hooks us up with that, but I didn't have that in campaign 1. I didn't have sponsors in campaign 1. I'm going to tell you, I had active searches in OfferUp, looking for castles, D&D, like props, anything I could get, like very budget conscious, and what I could bring to the table to bring it to life for my characters. Like one of my prime pieces, which is a beautiful castle, it has like kind of like embedded in the rock a little bit, is a fish tank aquarium castle. And it's beautiful.
Yep.
And it's beautiful. And like, I know I'm not selling the professional side of things, but I haven't used it in campaign.
Selling the person side of it, though. Like
for any DM out there, hitting the 5 senses. You've got the candles. They've got ones that smell like pine trees. So as your characters are traversing through the forest, like they smell it. Then at the table, you see it. And, if it takes going to the dollar store, there's a awesome person you should go follow, Dollar Store DM. She's amazing. And go to the dollar store and you get little pine trees and you can flock them
this time of year.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Flock them with some moss. Comes with a bag of little moss that you can get as well.
Yeah. Throw it in the blender, toss it in glue, and you're done.
I mean, this guy's a crafting genius. But like, I've gotten birdhouses before and turned them into a village, and put some doors in front of them. So whatever you can do to immerse your players, to make it feel like they're there. I mean, you can be able to put on a game with just a dry erase mat and a couple minis and roll the dice. But, why not take it to the next level? Yeah. And that's why I think Chris and I are here right now with you, is we decided to take it to the next level for our players, to give them this epic journey and adventure outside of their work, outside of their day-to-day life, bills, responsibilities, everything. And so, I have done everything under the sun to look up science projects, to do I have there's this powder that solidifies, and so I had the big bat of campaign 1 throw down an ice spell, and you are stuck in ice. And it was in I actually ran it so it was like gelatin, they were stuck in ice. And so fire, like magic flames from the camping store, it's like you sprinkle them over an open fire and they turn green. Like, playtesting, this is great. Be safe. Disclaimer, be safe. But
you say that now, but 2 minutes ago, throw fire in their face. So I don't know what to believe here.
Fireball, I've ran, as we did as kids, an aerosol can with a lighter. Come on.
Fair.
So along the lines of just giving that wow factor, and what can you do? Always thinking okay, what can I do to next level this, to up it? I mean, I can go on and on about the fun things that we were able to do. Super grateful to be able to do for the players, and I'm excited for the new stuff I have planned too. Some secret stuff.
Oh yeah,
I can't tell you.
You can't tell me yet. You're right.
Come on, just a little bit.
Yeah.
So Chris, how about you when you're trying to create something immersive for your tables? How do you go about that?
So kind of definitely all the things that Morgan was talking about in creating that environment and pulling it all in. I use mood lightings for things. I'll dim the lights in the, I just finished up building my table thanks to the Forge Realm. Randy sent me some info on how to set it up. So that'll be set up in the next few weeks, kind of thing, to build that out. But mood lighting and changing LED lights these days are cheap. I think I bought the one for my table. It was like a 15-foot strip for $7, I think. Great. And so being able to, their players are walking through a tundra, and so you set a dimmed blue light and then combat spurs, and you flip it over to a red light, and you change the music. There's a bunch of different, musical artists out there that we both use separate ones, but both of them are out there, and it really pulls into either that sense of calm or that feeling of anxiety. And being able to induce all of those feelings, whether it's through sight or sense or smell or hearing, I believe is the key factor of how to create that immersive environment. The other thing, I think both of us do it, and I know a lot of other, is simple as just voicing characters. There's several characters that I have my players decided, hey, I like this character, and so now they're a whole NPC. It wasn't supposed to be, but it works out that way, right? And so now it's like I'll voice that character, and I don't even have to introduce the character. The players will be like, oh, that's who this is now. I don't have to introduce the character because of the timbre and the pitch and the tone that I use to voice that character. They're like, oh, like, fine, by all means. So definitely voicing, I think, plays a role into creating immersive environments because it makes the player reach back to a different part of their brain of like, oh, this is still my friend, or maybe it's not, maybe it's new players, but this is my friend DMing, but this is the character that he's portraying. So now I have to reach into a different part of my brain to recall that information. And it creates these like really cool niche little connections between you as the DM and then as the players that really kind of pulls them into it. I
was going to say earlier, sorry, real quick.
No, you go.
Leading by example is what I feel like you're getting. I was going to say that earlier when you have new people at the table, setting the tone, like throwing out crazy voices right away and getting those new players to pull out that role playing is so important.
Oh, totally.
Yeah.
And then, so because it's like we're going back to what we said before, you don't know the reason the player's there. Maybe they're shy because of things they have going on in their home life. And so being able to pull them out of that shell and give them the experience that is memorable. And whether that's through a crazy old crotchety man voice or like, some orc or, whatever the voices are that you're going to portray. I feel like voices is a really simple, easy, free way to do it. And then drawing, and you can, for voices, I mean, you gotta buy lights and minis and all those kind of things and all these other ones, but just voicing the characters, even if you're just playing with a dry erase mat, doesn't cost anything to look up a video on YouTube of, what does this character sound, from this movie or this cartoon sound like, and adapt it and then turn it into it. I mean, I grew up playing PC games, so I think that my standard go-to for when I voice like an old man is Deckard Cain from Diablo. Nice. And then I just adjust it up and down, left or right, or,
that's great.
Different, whether it's a funnier character or a more serious character, voicing them based off of that. I mean, that started for me with my daughter. Like, it was funny because it started off like reading her bedtime stories, right? And I'd probably voiced things throughout my whole life, but it wasn't until she was born that I would read her bedtime stories, and then we'd read like the little Disney books or the golden books, and then I would just instinctually trying to draw her into it, voice the characters of the book. And I remember it was a couple of years ago that I read her. She was like, asked if we could read a certain story, and I was like, sure. But whatever happened, I started off not doing the voices right, and she corrected me so fast. She was like, "Dad, what are you doing?" And I was like, "What do you mean reading the story?" She's like, "But why are you saying it like that?" I'm like, "What are you saying? Like what?" And she's like, you normally talk like this," or whatever the voice of the character was. And I was like,
"That's great.
Wow, okay, all right, here we go. Let's go. We're doing it."
That's awesome.
But I think
sorry.
Go ahead.
I was going to say I have so my background is as an actor, and one of the things one of my teachers once told me during a workshop was like, if you want to get better at delivering anything, really, just pick up a book and just read it and just keep reading it out loud. And like you said, start throwing in like, okay, you see like different punctuation marks. Okay, start playing around with those. What did those mean to you? How do those affect how that cadence goes? The different characters are starting up. Okay, so start trying to play with the tonality or maybe how they talk, how fast they talk, who, like all that kind of stuff. Just play, and you can literally just pick up any book and just read through it that way. Spend 15 minutes a night doing that, and you're going to get real good real soon.
or Morgan's case, 3 hours in the shower, and you're good. That'll work. That'll work.
So one other thing I want to ask you guys about on this topic specifically is we've sort of talked about like sort of in-person immersion. I think that that's like the ideal version of how all of this goes, right? But a lot of people these days, especially post-pandemic, a lot of people kind of are using Roll20 and other online like virtual tabletops to connect or find a game in maybe they live in an area that doesn't have a local game store, or like just doesn't have the ability for them to kind of pull this thing off, and so they want to do it and reach out to a GM online, join a group, whatever it is. Maybe you're doing actual play over the internet. How do you, as a GM, try to reach those folks who are through a computer screen, which I find super difficult? I hate this. Let me just say right up, I really hate not playing in person, because I find it so much more difficult to invest as a player and also to get investment as a GM. So how do you guys go about when you're using that kind of format? Do you have any tips or tricks, or is it just like, it's always hard, it's going to be hard no matter what you do?
I mean, I just have, based on my experience, which was our campaign 1 started in November 2019, and then COVID hit and March 2020. And so we had to pivot to Zoom. I mean, I don't think Roll20 was as prevalent as it is now back then, or I just didn't know about it. But I ran it with Zoom. That's what I was comfortable with. I ran it for work. And so everybody could jump in from all their different places, and then I could share screen of involving them, right? Like, this may not happen all the time in Roll20, but I like mailed letters out to the players, right? And so it depends on the scale of what you're doing it, but involving them, I would have maps drawn up of the city that they're in. And I would post that. So I would have a live feed of a table in front of me as well. This is not Roll20, but based on my experience, that's what I would do, is have maps, have pictures that I would normally maybe describe, but the more visuals they have in front of them so they don't get distracted at home, seem to be really good to keep the pace of the game going and to get them involved. And then falling back to the voices. Again, just that's a freebie that you can do in person or online, and just involving them with the voices. They know who's talking. That even if they aren't even watching the screen at that moment, they know which NPC is talking. So,
I think with the online with that though, it's like you have to rely on the tools that are available to you in the situation. And so when you're online, they can't smell, they can't necessarily see or hear, or they can hear, but they can't like feel the presence or all these other things. So relying on things like voicing characters or sound effects, or creating spell effects or background music, all these other things become a lot more important if you want to maintain that immersive environment. My Tuesday game, I have a buddy, the guy that, when I said we started this off, it was him and me. Like, it was our idea. We're like, hey, we're gonna start this game. And he's like, all right, cool, I'm not running it. I'm like, well then, so like I was like, fine, I'll run it. Well, he plays in the game. Well, he moved to Vegas, and so now every Tuesday he calls in, right? And so he calls in, and he calls in on an iPad, and I'll shift the iPad, and so it's set to me the most of the time, and I'll shift it down to the battle cam. I have him we tried it out the other night. It actually worked out better. But then I have his voicing. We'll mute the camera and then have the voicing ran through like an Alexa or a speaker, so that I can hear both ways a little bit easier. But as far as like online, I don't have too much experience with Roll20. I do have a lot of friends that play it. To me, it's like what you were saying, Nick, there's a feeling and a whole difference of the environment that I definitely prefer to and enjoy, and like to craft and cultivate this whole environment that I find is way more difficult if I were to try to do it online kind of thing. But I know some people prefer it. Some people really enjoy it. It's just one of those things that, to me, and the experience, I think Morgan and I both prefer to try to bring to the table. It doesn't necessarily work out the best with what we try to offer out to the players.
Sure. Yeah, that makes sense. All right, so we're coming towards the end here. So I want to ask one final question, kind of pick your brains on this kind of the theme of the episode encapsulated in this one question.
Oh boy.
Let's say that I'm somebody who wants to elevate my game, to take it from just like a friendly table, game that has no sort of real, stakes, I guess. And then I want to elevate it. I want to take it to a professional level, or I want to start an actual play, or I want to start professionally DMing at my local game store or whatever. What are like the first things that you guys would do? You guys have all gone through this process. So what were the big stumbling points that you sort of came up across, and how did you, what advice did you wish you had when you were making that transition?
Oh, that's good.
So I would say, I think there's a difference between you as the player and then you as the DM, right?
Yeah.
Understanding and receiving the expectation from the players that are going to be involved in this, I think, is a huge portion of that. Because if you have a group of 5 or 6 players and they tell you, hey, this is what we want the elevated experience, we want all these kind of things, and then listening to them, whether or not they're coming, and that goes back to the empathy thing we kind of started off with talking about, listening to the players, understanding, giving them and putting matching and trying to exceed the effort that they themselves put in, and then taking that and then knowing and reading them and improvising and then running with that experience, creating these custom story arcs for them, tying it into the overall plot, bringing them in, crafting little things. I think we had just talked about it the other day, of just taking the time out of it and give a damn. Is the thing. It's like, if you want that elevated, if you're just running a game every, Monday night because, it's Monday and this is what I do, it's never going to be the same experience as someone who takes the time, puts effort into it, listens to their players, actually gives a damn about the game, about the world, about their players that are at the table, and want to create the experience in the environment for the players to escape or get whatever they want out of it. So I think that, at least to me, that's the biggest thing, is having heart, giving a damn, and then listening to your players.
Yeah,
there's something in acting school, again, the first 2 years of any actor's training is basically them trying to strip out the self-consciousness that you have for yourself. So I also think that really aligns with what you're saying of it's actually okay to give a shit. You know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Really want this to be really good and to really invest yourself into it. There's nothing uncool or bad about that. Well, and it's actually very brave.
Yeah, right. And then one more side on the backside of that is ask your players for feedback, because you could put all this out there, and then I've got a whole highlight reel on my Instagram that's just reviews from players, because it's I want that feedback so I can be better, so I can continue to elevate and create a better experience for anybody that sits at the table. So I would say that's what I would add in.
No, I've done the same thing. Actually ran a Survey Monkey and texted it out to everybody. Is there too much role play? Just the right amount? Same with combat. What would you like to see? Additional comments. And it was a great check-in point I did during campaign 1. Haven't done that in campaign 2 yet, but it is, like Chris is saying, such an ebb and flow of reading the table, feeling out your character, what they like, what they enjoy, then putting those in front of them. The players are supposed to be the heroes in this. Okay, I'll joke and be all right, it's my goal to kill you tonight. And bring that bring that reality to the table. But based on what you were asking, as a DM, I've gone through this, taking it to the next level from campaign 1, the offered up things, and taking it to the next level to be that professional table that you want to be for everybody, I think, is building the community. I just got to be active in social media, and genuinely caring about everybody and finding these epic and amazing creators. I mean, I couldn't make this campaign without the sponsors that I have. And I just reached out to them like from true of heart, just like, hey, I would love to market you guys. I have a decent following, like, and showcase your beautiful products while you elevate the table for my players. And so getting all those people on board, and this community is 100% amazing.
Absolutely.
Like full of people, full of love.
People you've never even talked to before.
Yeah, they're just fantastic.
I mean, that's how we met. That's how we got. It was exactly that.
Yeah.
It's like just like, hey, let's run with this. Let's go with it.
Yeah, and collaborating and thank you for having us on, and this is a collaboration in itself, but we just taking it to the next level, elevating every aspect of what you were doing. Like every time I'm planning a session, I'm like, what can I do to make it better? What can I do to make it bigger? What can I do to involve the characters more? What backstory could I pull from them? Like, and hitting on maybe one of their backstories each session, like something to keep their attention at the table. So a wow factor, a cliffhanger. Like I make sure I think it's like he's saying, just generally care about your game, like you guys were both talking about, and show it through your gameplay and your DMing. Yeah,
Morgan, I think that's such a good point. And one really simple way to that I like to think about this stuff, and you basically just said this about like, take a look at every aspect of your session or your game and just think about how can you just like raise the level on that just a little bit. Like for me, what I've been working on recently is like, I've been kind of frustrated with combat just because it feels like the tempo slows down and sometimes players can kind of detach because it can take a while before their turn comes back. What I've been trying to do is take like a combat scenario that I want to run and then say, okay, what is a secondary or a tertiary objective in this combat that they can be thinking about? And also like, what's a non-combat aspect of this event that is happening while the combat is happening? So like maybe it's like someone has to figure out how to like read all of this magical text before it disappears, but there's also like 100 goblins trying to like, come and like destroy them. So there's like literally just taking your microscope and looking at every single part of your game and just saying like, how can I make this just a little bit more interesting? It doesn't have to be hard or complex. Just has to be interesting. Can you engage more varying types of people, kind of thing?
Yeah,
exactly.
And we could chat later on combat, but a trick that we just did an arena combat, and a trick that I utilize baseball terminology. So like, hey, you're on deck. Hey, you're in the hole. Like, so they know that they're coming up soon and I prepped ahead of time. Hey, this is a combat heavy session. Prep, know what your spells, what your attacks do, the distance on them, have the dice ready for if you guys do hit. I mean, I have a tracker here that's going to show, when they're coming up next, but they may not pay attention. And then I say, focus and listen like what the other players are doing. You can play off of them. You can hold actions. Like, so really getting them to be involved, because that does slow down. And in campaign 1, I actually, once they got the flow of things, I said, hey, I'm going to put a 2-minute timer on each of your guys' turns.
I was going to say, you said it right beforehand too. It's like we pulled in, like setting the expectation and doing the prep work to know, hey, this is going to be whatever the session looks like, and advising and including all the players too.
Actually, honestly, that is something, funnily enough, how simple it is something that I've actually never done, which I think is very, like, I should definitely be doing this. This is very stupid that I haven't been, but just like, because what the session is going to look like. And if you're like, okay, this is going to be like a very skill intensive thing or a puzzle intensive, you can just let people know, like, bring your thinking caps, because like this is going to be you're going to be thinking through a lot of like interesting things, or like you said, Morgan, like this is going to be a heavy combat. Really familiarize yourself with that spell list. I know that people haven't been looking at it so frequently in the last few sessions. Like I think that's a great way to approach it too, of like giving your players heads up. Because they're also participants and they want to do a good job, even though it's like fun for them. They want to do it right?
And you're not giving anything away, especially if this is a storyline that's been building up. They kind of know maybe something that might be coming or whatever the case. You're not giving away your monsters. You're not giving away secrets, nothing like that.
That's where the cliffhangers come into play. Like you leave it a cliffhanger and they're like, they know something's right there, and then they sit there for the next following week and they're like, okay, wait, where's this going to go kind of thing. When players reach out to me afterwards and they're like, dude, I had to sit there and think with myself for a minute after the session. I'm like, I did a good job. So I'm not going to pay your therapy bills, but I'll.
I cause trauma in a fun way.
Hey, fun trauma.
All right. So Morgan Dangerfield of Heroes of Evermore, Chris Peters, the Forever DM. How can people interface with your content? How can they find you? How can they sort of engage with your vast breadth of work? This is the time to plug the things and to tell people where they can find you, because I think that there's going to be a lot of folks looking your way. So where can we find you guys?
Mine's easy. Instagram. I'm keeping it simple for myself and my mental state, and just putting all of our content on Instagram. We may expand going forward, but at Heroes of Evermore on Instagram. So go check us out. We've got recaps up of our sessions. We've got Evermore Encore of after sessions with players. And all sorts of fun stuff. And then our book is on Amazon. So our link is in the bio of our Instagram. But obviously just Amazon, type in Heroes of Evermore. You could check it out. That is part 1, An Unlikely Gathering, which is part 1 of our campaign 1. So you can see how Evermore came to life and how our heroes started the journey. So
and for everybody, those links will also be in our show notes as well, if I can remember them. So I'll definitely have them down there for people to check out too. How about you, Chris? Where can people find you?
Easy enough. Same on Instagram. The number 4 ever DM, all one word. And I'll post on there because for any of those anybody listening in that's in the Southern California area, I do post, hey, I'm running a game on this date. I've got 5 or 6 slots open. Message me for the details and all these kind of stuff for anybody that's interested or wants to get in or kind of wants to see exactly what this whole thing and what we're talking about it. Shoot me a message, ask questions. More than willing to take time out of my day to answer anything for anybody that anyone has. Kind of one of the things, pay it forward. This community has always done that for me. So I am excited to be able to be in a position to do that for anyone else.
Awesome.
Nice.
Well, on that really nice note, I think that we're going to wrap up. Everybody, go check them out. The links to where you can find them are going to be in the show notes. And thank you so much for listening to another episode of Tabletopped. If you are interested in engaging with us, you can go to our website, tabletoppod.com. We have a contact form there for you to send your questions and requests. You can also head to our Patreon, patreon.com/tabletopped, and you can find all of our extra episodes. We have a new podcast called Wild Magic, which is just us talking about random shit. So if that's your game, head over there and check that out. In the new year, we're really going to be dropping a lot of module content, homebrewed stuff that we're making for people. So it's a really good use of your money, because you can join for as low as $1. If you're also interested in supporting the podcast, but not financially, that is totally fine. Just head and rate and review Tabletopped, and we will see you all next Monday for another episode.